Welcome everyone, I'm the captain, Ross Memphis Pambrun. With me as always is my friend and the co-host, the president, Lawrence Gervais. We're broadcasting from Calgary, Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta, part of the historic Métis Nation homeland. We would also like to acknowledge these lands are the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, with whom we share this land on the basis of our historical and ongoing relationships. We'd like to thank all of our First Nation friends, Métis settlements, and to all of our Métis brothers and sisters and families. We'd like to give thanks to our elders for their guidance and to Mother Earth for the time she allows us to be here and use and share her bounty. And now, folks, from the captain and the president, let's get the wheels squeaking. Such a polite introduction. Here we are, Lawrence, one more time. Folks, as you heard from the comments before as we start our video, here I am, Ross Memphis Pambrun, CEO of the Memphis Group, Satellite Environmental Monitoring, and my opportunity every week is to sit across with my co-host, the fabulous, the president, Lawrence Gervais. Folks, thanks again always for jumping on. I'm excited about our guest today because these two brothers who have a big tenure of time and experience down in the very southern Alberta region, I guess, but it seems as though they bring in probably guests and artists from all over North America. I wouldn't even be surprised if it wasn't further into their, let's say, entertainment hub in a sense. So the Pogo Brothers are going to be on with us today. And Lawrence and I, as we do each week, want to thank our listeners. Thank you very much to our subscribers. We always appreciate the emails. We always appreciate the connection and the communication. And we always enjoy sharing conversation from a Métis perspective. Lawrence, let's take our listeners through a little bit about what's happening in the region, in the province this week, because I know there's a bunch of things we got to talk about. And then we know the Pogo Brothers will be jumping on with us as we close out our, I guess, May show now. Run us through a few
it's
things.
The beginning of the May show, yeah. But we're almost hitting onto our year anniversary here with the podcast, and we're pretty excited about moving the ventures forward, especially with our new TELUS agreement with Bamboo Shoots and us, and moving forward on some programming on television, and then looking at ways to actually probably host events at some point in time. And then certainly, the big question is where Squeaky Wheel is headed and if it's moving away from the nation. And not really, it's being supported by the nation, but it's definitely moving out of the office of Region 3 into something else. So we're pretty excited about that.
Well, and I think in our case, and we talk about this and we've shared this with our listeners a little bit already, when you want to extend the conversation, it needs to grow. It needs to get bigger. It needs to carry further. We got to make sure that we capture the attention of all the people in the other provinces and capture the attention of our nation, because as we continue to extend the conversation about who the Métis people are. And it's funny, you and I talk, and I know you sit in, 5-10 meetings a day, it seems. And when you do your presentations, isn't it interesting how when we talk at government levels and you say, well, here we are with the Métis, who are they exactly? Oh, you think it has to start at different levels. Now, it's got to start in our schools. The conversation has to start in our schools. But it's funny, you'd think the government officials would really be getting brief on these decisions. But how do you deal with it when some high-level official says to you, well, I'm not exactly sure who the Métis are? How do you approach it?
Yeah, well, parts of me always are really 50-50 about those statements, right? Because I'm not here to judge, but I definitely know politicians out there who know their constituents, who know the different populations, have a complete understanding of what that is, full circle. And it is a bit of concern if I voted a member in or an MLA, and they came to me and saying, well, who are you? Well, number one, I voted for you. And number two, the Métis, the real gets to be a concern if you're at a politician and you don't know the landscape of the people that voted you in, well, then, yeah, that's a bit of an issue, right? Because you'd figure that would be the place where you'd probably want to learn who they are, right?
And actually, for us, even me as a listener, Lawrence, that was a very politically correct answer. Not in the sense that I think that you're shirking the question by any means at all, but you're right. When you represent a population, you need to ensure that those members are being heard, that they are aware, and that there's, that you're acknowledging who they are.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it'd be if I was an MLA and you took me out of this Métis Nation role and I'm sitting in front of all these people, what I'd want to understand who the Indigenous folks are, who the gay, lesbian, B2 and Q and plus, that population. I'd want to know about the Indian population, the Sikh population, all of them. And you would have to know that in order for you to sit in those seats and represent them.
Yeah.
And that's why I get a little bit concerned when they say, oh, we don't know too much about the Métis, who are you, type thing. And then I have to sit there and explain who the Métis people are, right?
Yeah.
And it gets a little frustrating for me, but you know what? I'm going to continually do it. But in the back of my mind, just so you know, if there's any MLAs watching right now, this is what I'm thinking, right?
Folks, you heard it right from here. You got to see the inside of Lawrence's brain. And now let's jump on to something just a little bit different, Lawrence. What I find crazy right now is every day, it seems like the news media tells me about some new family-friendly product that has been somebody stuffed marijuana into to try and get it across the border. Isn't it legal to buy this stuff? And from what I understand, it's not desperately expensive. Why is everybody trying so hard to sneak marijuana across the border? What am I missing? Is there something that is it just to give the police something to do? Because folks, they're busy enough.
Well, aren't the police just policing these lockdowns? Aren't they busy doing that?
Well, okay, right.
No, I'm just kidding. They're not even focused on that, yeah.
Folks, back to blue. Nobody's upset here. We all love the police, and they're having difficult challenges. But yes.
No, I have a sibling. He's a staff sergeant.
Yes,
just relax.
Good point.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I don't know why they're doing stuff illegally. Maybe it's because of the licensing for the Canadian government's requiring all these marijuana growers. Maybe there's not enough. I don't know. Yeah. I really don't know the economics there.
Folks, if you know the economics behind why people are sneaking something across that's legal, make sure you fire it over at us as always, because I like reading your comments. tsw@métis3.org.
Or put it in the comments below on, this video.
Yeah.
How about that?
I would love that as well.
Skip the email. Yeah, just let us know now.
Solar power, Lawrence. I know there's a ton of programs that are going on. And the reason I sometimes bring it up is because, it's thrown in our faces all the time that we got to get rid of fossil fuels. We got to get rid of fossil fuels. And folks, I know we are working towards lots of different types of green energy. And they do in our oil industry does a lot to try and ensure that we utilize all of the fuel, all of the natural resource of these hydrocarbons, of these fossil fuels. But, it seems like every time I talk to somebody now, and they'll show me this beautiful lamp that they've had for 5 years that's solar powered. And I said, well, how is it still working? And these are big, beautiful things with little solar powered lamps on top. Well, when it gets dark, it only stays lit for about 20 minutes. So at one point, it probably lasted all night. Now it stays lit for about 20 minutes. I'm like, well, what are you planning on doing with it? Well, I'll just throw it out, I guess, and go buy another one. I'm not sure that how we were thinking of utilizing solar power sometimes. Everybody wants everything to be solar powered, but how long do they want it to last for? There also needs to be a way to hold contain the energy so that it can, the batteries that support it. But you know how you make batteries, folks? It isn't just magic. It isn't just water and air. It ends up being you use a lot of fossil fuels. Maybe what we should be looking at is, in all of this, in our discussions, how do we utilize our fossil fuels in order to try and continue to build proper green energy, but also remind people, are you just buying it to have it? because I'm not too sure. Everybody wants everything solar nowadays, and yet they're still willing to throw it out 5 years later.
Well, I mean, I look at it this way. If the economics was wonderful in green energy and these companies could just turn over and make mass profits, they will do it. But the numbers they're so minimal right now for profit that it's really hard to convince these companies to really go 100% over to green energy. Until we come to that solution where we're making these individuals money, they will switch over. But that is the bottom line, right? But there's great technology out there. We get presented technology about green energy all the time, and we support them. But at the end of the day, when they're speaking to these high-level boardrooms and convincing these oil and gas executives on a different format or a different technology, well, they're going to be asking their accountants and all that later on and go, what are the numbers here, right? And then they get presented the numbers and it's not turning over the balance, right?
Yeah. No, totally agree. And that's a very good point. If all of a sudden it was so easy to just make green energy, why wouldn't everybody be doing it? But folks, it takes a lot. And the idea that right now, we look at electric vehicles and that they want, more and more and more vehicles. Well, the battery, the materials that are required to make those batteries, so that every single person out there, all you have to do is pretty much harvest all the oil, take all of the battery ingredients out of it. Yeah, but what did you have to do? You had to still get the oil.
I mean, they still have to mine for those batteries, and every cell phone that we have, there's certain mining involved in that too. I know they're concerned with the coal mines, and I understand that because that's another energy, but they're still turning the soil over for another technology, right? And to support greener sort of pasture, right? And for us, you really have to consider what the implications are, no matter what the natural environment is, right? So, if we as Indigenous folks can assess environments or come up with companies to be able to do the environmental assessments on behalf of these companies, that's encouraging. It's not just line monitoring. It's not just those jobs. It's encouraging companies to come forward to, if you're going to do business, well, then we're going to police it, right?
And I think that we need to, really focus on the fact that we need the time has to move steadily. Because if all of a sudden you just say, well, let's just get rid of this industry, that isn't going to work. We still need the time in order to make the products, to develop them, and to communicate, with all these different groups but I think we're doing it. We're starting to make the change. We're starting to recognize that the change has to occur. So
there's significant energy disruption people, and that's the term they use. But, are they being listened to? Are they bringing up to the table to say to these guys, hey, this is what your shareholders are going to get if you turn to a more greener pasture, right? Or to greener technology, and understanding what that is, right? And that's part of the problem is a lot of people don't understand it. So then they just go back to the normal routine, right?
Yeah, right. Kananaskis. This is something you wanted to bring up, and I know why you wanted to bring it up, but I want to hear it from you.
Well, I mean, I'm not, supporting a big, large effort and recognition, but, sometimes Alberta government just kind of picks and chooses what they recognize. And that's part of the issue. There's no consistency. Yet they still want us to consult with us when there's a, Alberta Parks project that's happening. But then when it comes to them honoring past exemptions for First Nations, Métis settlements and Métis harvesters, and they leave M&A entirely out, well, then we go, well, you're already speaking to us about this project, and then you're not honoring the past system on this hand, right?
Yeah.
Where's the balance, So, and it's all about recognition. And they use the Cursicorn case over and over and over again to say, there's no Métis in the South. And they just pick and choose when that happens.
Yeah. For some reason, federally, there's better conversations. And then provincially, all of a sudden, it's like, well, the feds sure recognize this, but I don't know. Now it doesn't seem to work out for us right now. And we really want to capture money, from the parks I agree that we do need to figure out a way to best get the support of our community when it comes to the costs of our parks, of our provincial parks, when all of a sudden they're overrun. I mean, I drove through the parks last year. Cars were just parked on the side of the road, trailers parked anywhere, garbage everywhere, because this is the only space that these people could find in order to stay. And I'm thinking, I wouldn't want to sleep right beside this highway, cars going by at 140 kilometers an hour, but, well, somebody is. But yet somebody still has to maintain it, take care of it. So I respect them, the government for that, but they do have to consult. Hey.
So they're going 140 kilometers an hour in this province?
Not me. I just see them going 140 kilometers an hour.
No, I'm not a cop, but I'm just related to one. Yeah.
Exactly. Rodeo, Lawrence.
Oh, yes.
So before we get to the Pogo Brothers, I just wanted to jump on a couple of the things that are happening with regards to the vaccine. There's some cohort stuff and families and such, but let's talk just a little bit about the rodeos, because we love rodeo.
Well, rodeo season, we all know, starts in May, right? It goes all the way till July. And how many are going to happen, where they are. It seems like pockets are happening. Strathmore announced theirs. We know Bowden will have theirs. We're still waiting for the Stampede to give us 100%. But I don't know. I think at this point in time, if we don't get enough of the vaccination rates to where it's supposed to be, we won't see nothing.
And I read posts and I'm like, folks, I get it. I'm as Western as you, I think, and I'm rodeo pro as you, and I love our animals. I like taking care of our animals. And I respect our industries for what they do when it comes to it. But that doesn't change the ICU beds. And, you read, it's like, well, this rodeo is our right and we're going to go through it. Well, no, our right is our right to health care that we've all stood up for. And, if we keep putting together people unnecessarily, and Dina Hinshaw does a great job of saying, folks, getting together is where our problems are. This is it. Our rodeo community, our rodeo brothers and sisters and families, folks, don't just force it because you want this. We all want to get through this. So, when the allowances come along, then let's follow them. Let's jump on them. Let's celebrate them. When the province says yes, but that leads into the whole cohort thing. The difficulty right now that's happening in our province is all these restaurants and the government saying, well, it should only be family members. Who's going to police that? You look down at the bars on where people are sitting outside, thankfully, and you could tell those 6 people sitting there don't live in the same family. They're not living in the same cohort. So, but whose responsibility? Is it the servers? Is it the person who admits them? Should the police be walking around? That's a hard challenge. But folks, it's been proven around the world. If you keep the connection down, the numbers go down.
Yeah.
And we've talked about it many times.
Yeah. I mean, I know the rodeo community, too. And I know they all want to gather. They all want to do their thing. And it's just a matter of, whether or not to do it safely. Yeah. And sometimes the rodeo mindset is always very independent. They're independent thinkers. Yeah. In terms of they don't want to be told what to do. Yeah. And, so, you have that little formula in the mix too. And that could lead you to a very dark path.
And folks, you're hearing it here from the Squeaky Wheel. We want to celebrate rodeo, just like we love the Chucks. We want to celebrate that, but let's do our part. And Lawrence, now's about our time that we get to bring on our guests. Folks, as I mentioned a little earlier today, we are bringing on the Pogo Brothers. And I think the best way to reference these two is probably by their business names, Good Times. So with us today is Roy Pogo, Johnny Pogo. We've had you on the show before, and we're always excited to hear your conversation. And it's been quite a long time. So before we jump too deep into all of the stuff that's happening now and how we're all trying to figure and navigate, how have things been since the last time we talked? We all thought things were going to start opening up, but how are you two managing as we move forward here with Good Times?
Well, Good Times is just on the back burner right now. We're not allowed to open. Even before, when bars were open, we weren't allowed to be open because we're an entertainment establishment. So I guess technically we could have opened our doors, but nobody's coming down to a basement to drink $3 canned beer, right? Like the reason people come to Good Times is because there's a comedian on stage. There's fun to be had, not just a dark, dingy basement. So we've been closed since November, and I've just been making YouTube videos that get tens of viewers.
Well, then in a way, you're not that much further ahead or behind us. There's usually just less beer drinking that happens on our show.
That's
But
right.
it's, we can always say the term unique challenge. We could always say that it's, that this is something new for all of us. We could all say, yeah, the whole world understands the challenge and what we're all trying to bear. You guys are in like you're pointing out, in that industry that how does the government navigate when they didn't even know really what you were doing before, right? Here our governments are trying to make decisions when it comes to the gyms, when it comes to any area of connection and schoolyards and such, going, well, let's make a decision right now. Well, you didn't really make great decisions before. I mean, how are we, how are the rest of us supposed to navigate this? And thankfully, is the revenue manageable for you guys when it comes to, is it because it's Lethbridge or because you were prepared? And how do we, now we're even talking a few more potentially curfews in areas. I'm like, how do, I only hope that the businesses that connect people like yours, we got to keep them so that they survive.
Well, and there's choices to be made, right? Because there's opportunities for grant funding. Though the loans that come in that you can be forgived $10,000 if you don't spend, or you can pay back X amount by a certain date. And then there's the grants from the province that come in that kind of mitigate some expenses. But the problem with some of the loan funding is that it's cool to get like 40 grand up front for your business, but you got to pay 30,000 of that back by 2023 or what have you. And so you're kind of put in a position where you're incurring debt, and you're hoping that when things go back to kind of some level of normal, or we're allowed to gather again and high five each other and shake hands and stuff, we're trying to say that all of a sudden the customers are going to return full force like they used to be, not taking into account that the marketing that went in to build that clientele and that customer base was a lot of effort. And so how do we do that post-COVID and then immediately start bringing in revenue like that? That's a big challenge, right?
And one thing that I don't like about it is businesses that don't need the money, that get the 40 grand or get the 60 grand, will sit on that money and then pay back the 30 or 40 and get essentially 10 or 20 grand for free. Whereas the businesses that really need that money spend it all to survive. And then when the payment comes back at the end of the month, they don't have the 30 grand to pay back. So now they're having to pay back 40 grand plus interest. So it's really benefiting those that don't need it.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And
right. If only we had a way to entertain people at home without going to bars. I mean, maybe a book club while you're drinking beer or intoxicating, or you can read books. And I know you've done that before, Roy.
50 Shades of Grey.
It was very entertaining. I think it was around the first lockdown. You definitely had an audience there when you're reading your books while drinking your German beer.
Explain this to me just a little bit better, because Lawrence, you had once alluded to it. So what I understand is you're drinking beer and reading and recording it, and your first choice was 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah, there's a really good story behind that too. So before 50 Shades of Grey was popular, I, for some reason, purchased it because I thought it was the next new detective novel by E.L. James that was going to sweep the nation. So I'm flying to Dublin, reading into about chapter 4, and I start realizing this is one kind of risque detective book. There is going to be some kind of, crazy stuff happening. So I had the book, and I thought, why not read because some crazy stuff happens. Have you read 50 Shades of Grey or watched the Hollywood movie?
Well, I listened to you about the Red Room.
The Red Room. Oh my goodness.
Yes, and then her relationship meeting his family and all these things. And
Christian Grace, there's no
conflict
expense. Like he's in there. And so, but like, so when we talk comedy, have you told a joke to a room full of Zoomers when they're all on mute? Who knows what they're doing when their video's off? And then there's just no laughter back at you. I will tell you, that's just one of the most like daunting things.
Well, and when you talk about like entertaining people on the computer, a lot of comedians out there are doing Zoom shows. I did one, and exactly what Roy said. I'm sitting there telling my jokes, and no response. Like people would be laughing. I'd see a few people, like the one person on screen, they would like go, and that's it. That's all you see. There's no laughter coming through. It was horrible. So I'm waiting till live comedy is coming back before I go do any more jokes to people.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are doing outdoor shows now. The podcasters I listen to down in the States, like those comedians, because I follow a lot of them. I mean, they are doing some outdoor ones, but it's really tough you're right, to get a good reaction from a crowd, because you kind of feed off that, I'm sure, as a comedian, right, when you're on stage.
Yeah, and especially when you get like the Zoom emojis are cool and all, but like when you see like a laughing face emoji, you're like, oh, that hit them real good. But there's no sound.
Or everyone's doing this.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Just the happy emojis and stuff. And like half the people with their cameras off, like some of them are taking dumps. Like you don't know what people are doing behind the camera, right? There's so much shit that goes on when the camera's off that like that half your audience is just they're doing something weird and something else. So it's kind of a bit of an anomaly, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I concur.
John concurs.
I'm a musician as well, and I've played a number of shows, and it's funny. I've watched people do their taxes, making meals. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, I guess my real question should be is, what am I not seeing when those screens are off? But I hadn't really been. I guess I didn't go there would be the term. But yeah, no, that's fabulous.
Well, think about all the things we've done. I mean, let's be honest here. Who are we trying to fit? I mean, all the things that we've done are what other people have done. And then there's just those people that take it to a whole nother level. They're just like the camera's off, they're on mute, they're listening to a voice, and something's happening. Who knows? I don't even want to guess.
Well, that's why every house has a front door and you shut it, like, so you don't see anything. Keep that door shut.
That's right. Yeah. So it's been tough times because, with the comedy club, like John's still very much in. I actually sold my shares in the comedy club at the beginning of the pandemic. So the both of us have been running our entertainment company, but we haven't been able to get any gigs because nothing's open and weddings.
I did one wedding over the summer. It was really weird because people weren't allowed to like go from table to table, and people would just come up in my grill. Like this family did not believe COVID was real, and I very much do. So they would just come up to me with like no mask on and be like, "Play some Taylor Swift," and I'm sitting there like, "Oh."
Yeah, so we got the occasional wedding in, which was fun, but yeah.
Does with your tenure of your company down in Lethbridge, is that keeping you connected within the Métis community so that you know where the other Métis artists are and the familiarity with all of the youth or the connection with, let's call it our age versus the elders, Lawrence's age. So Is that one of the skill sets that you guys had developed as a result? The Métis community is pretty close knit when it comes to a lot of our kitchen parties and our events. Yeah, has your company extended to that awareness?
Well, that's a really interesting question. So, we're Métis from Saskatchewan, so we grew up in a real traditional family there, and so that was a big part of our upbringing, like around our grandma and our aunties and family members connected. And then when you move here to Southern Alberta, it's an interesting. When I moved here, I started working with the Métis local right away in 2009, and the governance structures changed over the years. But because of that, I was able to meet a lot of the artists who are doing the beadwork, who are playing fiddle. A lot's happening in Southern Alberta, but it's very scattered. But then, unfortunately, I think as we're all aware, Métis politics is kind of a fickle in nature, because we've got so many opinions and so many ideas. And I jigged a lot for the local here. So I jig all the time for the local and perform for them and do those things. So I've met a lot of people, but because of political differences at times, it's unfortunate that has to get in the way of all the good that comes from our culture and our communities and our people. But those that are not connected to, say, formal politics, they're here and they're doing their things, and it's beautiful. So we do have some amazing artists in Southern Alberta that we keep in contact with. And our businesses certainly help bring that out as well.
Yeah, and shout out to Audrey Morin. I just wanted to make sure, that's certainly your matriarch, and she's a friend of our families too. So
yeah.
But the whole Morins. I mean, I grew up, with so many, especially Jules who lived across the street from me. Yeah, I know he's a cousin of yours, but shout out to Jules Morin if he's watching. But I think you are right. I mean, politics sometimes gets in the way of the real deep, rich culture, the grassroots level, because a lot of them just, they keep an arm's length away because they don't want to really go too much into there, because they're artists. They want to be independent anyway. So, but for me, I'd rather encourage them to come forward and build something, So this is why we're interested in some of the stuff that you guys are doing down there.
Yeah, I worked for the Métis local here, and I no longer work there. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
Roy, I absolutely agree with you. It's too often, and your words, which I absolutely 100% agree with, for a politician almost sound like fighting words. But as Lawrence even pointed out, those two things shouldn't cross over, right? It becomes church and state. It becomes those relationships. We should all be excited every opportunity to have somebody with the strength who's willing to jig.
That's right.
I've never had the strength. I've never had the ability. There's been lots of times where, how do you get that message out to the younger people? For me, for most things, it's humility. I'm willing to try anything. Right. And it's okay to try some, because some people are going to fall in love with it. But you're right. When all of a sudden you allow the politics to get in, and Johnny, I'm a bit familiar with some of the stuff, because in our world of the squeaky wheel, we try to, become aware of everything that's happening within our communities and try and share the conversation. But the two people or multiple people, or when people don't get along, we have to respect the fact that it's okay for somebody to have a different opinion. You don't always have to agree, but at the end of the day, are we supporting the right positive cause? And that's why I like talking to you guys, because I think this is connecting the people, the Métis culture. Let the politics, unfortunately, unfold. But it's a shame that they get intertwined.
Well, and I completely agree with that, and to further that too, like, we have so many Métis families in the south of Alberta here that are reclaiming their identity or coming back to the culture due to like a heavy presence of racism in the south of Alberta. Many Métis families kind of felt it was best not to identify during those very formative kind of, those periods of like bringing our rights back when our activists came from the 60s kind of onwards. And so when I jig in schools, I have all these young little kids coming up to me, and they're saying like, hey, I'm Métis, and they see something they recognize, and they're really excited to see like their culture somewhat represented in schools, that there's someone out there dancing, that there's all this happening. There's so much from a culture and just from a humanist perspective that our families are in such need of. They want to connect to something, but politics just sometimes isn't where the connection piece is.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And sometimes I look at, if we're not doing things out on their own, just like L'Uriel, who's a politician, made a prophecy about, the artists, bringing back, the spirit, and it would take 100 years. Right. And I look at people like Jean Taillé, who's a lawyer who's involved in politics, but she's still a storyteller on the other end, right? And she's learned how to adapt both, right? And I think that's the healthy balance. That's what you want. And she's encouraging both sides to happen, right? And that's how you should be as a politician. But, politics, it's definitely beneficial to the nation because that's what we need. But we definitely need to support the artists who are in our areas. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, when I seen that quote, because Riel died, I think in like 85.
Yeah.
And then he said 100 years later, the artists. And I was born in 1986. And I was like, I'm that artist. I'm the 100 years later. I'm going to go on stage and change the world.
And John has the hair of Louis Riel too, so he's got that going on as well.
Oh, and the goatee. Didn't Louis Riel have a goatee too at some point?
Yeah.
Big long beard.
He had some kind of really
patchy beard.
Yeah, some amazing neck beard going on, and like he just had some looks. You know, he was very stylish for the late 1800s, you know, kind of era, and the you know mid to. He was a stylish dude.
Well, they have Louis Riel's hair at the Glenbow Museum in the back room.
Wow,
So
really?
Next time John's up in Calgary, we'll go for a little tour and we can compare the little curls with his.
Yeah. I always wanted to play Louis Riel in a movie, and if the hair matches, it's meant to be.
Well, and to tell you guys, I had a very interesting idea, fellas, and maybe it's something we could all collaborate on, but I think it's a brilliant idea. I was reading Song of Batoche by Maya Karan, and I've had the pleasure of connecting with her through Facebook. And she writes about all our ancestors up in Batoche, but from a really unique perspective. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool to turn that book with her permission into a script and finally, you know, shoot a Métis film from our perspective up in the kind of more Hollywood realm based on kind of her storytelling from Song of Batoche. And I don't know, I just thought it would be a unique idea because our story hasn't been told in any type of a larger movie other than, you know, Harry Daniels maybe playing a fur trader in like that old kind of Western kind of realm. But, you know, I thought that would be interesting. I just want to hear what you guys think.
Well, I've been saying this since the dawn of my era in 2014 is that, yeah, we need a TV show, we need feature films. And then Revenant happened, and there was an opportunity to tell the actual fur trading Métis story, and they didn't. Yeah. Right. And it was kind of a lost cause for me because that was the opportune time to do it. And then the only half breed that they even talked about was, you know, the main actor's Leonardo's son, who was basically living in this filth and being, you know, walked through the mud and treated poorly. I'm like, well, no, absolutely everybody was, you know, all Métis in those days, right? They were all mixed blood, and this is how they worked the land, right? And they really lost that opportunity to tell that story.
There's also that There's also that Netflix.
But I think as storytellers like yourselves, myself, Gene, and all them, and Maya, and all these writers really need to work on these significant projects. And we have Randy Bradshaw on Region 3, who's a producer and a Gemini Award winner, right?
It has to happen.
Who could lead the charge.
It has to happen.
It has to happen.
Yeah. Because there was that one on Netflix too, the one that talks about kind of colonialism and contact. And again, there's no reference to Métis in it. There's only reference to, like, again, this notion of the hybrid half-breed, kind of this rebellious two-faced character that's like, you know, one way or the other. I thought Steven Spielberg did a good job in Into the West, but because it was Americanized, they weren't considered Métis, but he did a really good job of showing the unique nuances of mixed families at the time of contact. But we haven't, our story needs to be bigger, and it needs to be, like, I know BC got their Métis TV. They have a Métis TV station now. So I don't know what's going to be on it, but it'll be cool.
I think it's on the spiritual channels. I think.
Yeah, it is. I think it is on a spiritual.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Well, and here,
you know, I look at those Louis Riel. The only two Louis Riel movies that stand out to me is one, in the main actor is from Quebec, right? And then we have, who's not Métis, and then we have another, you know, Billy Morasti. Shout out to Billy, he's a great actor, but he's definitely First Nations playing Louis Riel, right? So I think for us as Métis people, now is the time. We have enough storytellers to start even, you know, expanding on Louis Riel's story even, but
yeah.
You know, we'll see what happens in the future, but the time is now, I think.
Yeah. Well,
I think the province does a pretty good job of with the AlbertaMétis.com, where we send out the Voyager voice, the things that are happening. We're starting to see that better connection. But what lacks is our own province, our own government saying, oh, well, I'm not really too sure if there were any Métis south of Red Deer. Well, hold on here. Like, here the four of us are already going to be screen actors, as each of us is going to be fighting to who's going to be Louis Riel. And we're fighting our own province to say, well, we were. I mean, there's a historical record. There's Métis cart trails. There's, as they do, the archaeology, they continue to find more and more reference to the Métis people. I guess maybe we, for lack of a better term, let's just say fight, but maybe it's that we promote on both ends. Yeah, we need the movies, and we also need those movies to then say to the government, we're doing the research for you. Like, government, it's here. Yeah. Don't try to ignore it. And that's why I always encourage everybody, there's no harvesting region down here yet. But as I comment to our listeners all the time, folks, make sure you register for your harvesting license. Whether or not you hunt, whether or not you do that, it might be something you want to share with your generational family as you move forward. They may want to. And it shows the government that we are still interested in the rights that were given to us, or that we should be allowed based on the history of us in this nation and this region. So, but I love the movie idea. Hey, Lawrence and I say it all the time. We will join anything that will make Lawrence and I more rich. So whatever ideas you guys got that are going to bring in lots of money, there's no doubt that I'm interested.
All right.
Actually, in the bylaws, it's very clear. Yeah, in the bylaws, I can't adhere to that because in the bylaws, it's very clear about me having a second income.
That's a good point. Okay, so I'll be the one who always says it. Lawrence is usually the one who corrects me. But yeah, hey, I just love that. I love that people bring ideas to us so that we get to share them within our community, and we will find those places in order for, the interest to hopefully continue to foster. Lawrence, we may not have too much time left on our show. How would you like to close out our session with the brothers here?
Well, I mean, maybe just hear from either one of them on what they think for a goal for the future. And I know it's COVID now and it's really hard to forecast anything, but what would you like to see in this next little while?
Well, for myself, I'm getting healthy. I'm eating healthy and working out, and I've lost 45 pounds this year. So that's
congrats.
That's a huge
wow.
step.
We do this.
Fabulous.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to tell my fat jokes anymore, but I'll have to write some other ones, I guess. But yeah, just getting back to performing. I can't wait to get on a stage again. I haven't stepped foot on one since November 28th, and that's the longest I've gone since I started doing comedy without going on stage, and getting a little frustrated and what's the word I'm looking for? Captive?
Eager,
I don't know.
Maybe eager?
Eager beaver. Actually, funny story about a beaver. No, I can't tell that.
That's a good question. And just for myself, I'm doing my PhD at the U of L here. I've had some support from Rupert's Land, which is really great, and also the Métis Scholar Award at the U of L. But I'm doing my research in this field, so it's been quite. I've done a lot of work, here with the MNA and locals in MNS and over even in BC, and so it's been really great to kind of provide my own thoughts, go through all the literature, the research, and really try to take a holistic and kind of overarching approach to the identity politics conversation that we always find ourselves in, like, the core of. So we'll be always in touch doing that. But I just want to say congratulations to both of you for this really great podcast. I think it's really great to get our word out there and get our voice out there and to connect with each other across the province. So kudos to both of you. I think that's great. I love the Squeaky Wheel podcast. So, we'll be in touch as we continue on.
Well,
yeah, thank you, Roy.
Yeah, thank you, Roy. And anytime you gain anything when it comes to the academia that you're working on, we love sharing that message. And you're right. We struggle with it all the time when people are like, well, I disagree with your identity, or I disagree with this and that. Well, I'm happy to learn more. Do you have anything to back up your statements? Well, no, right. I just disagree. Well, I do know people who have some information to back up their statements. So I'm gonna lean towards this side before I go your ignorant route. So thank you for doing that and the effort. And yes, we talk Rupert's Land all the time. They're great agency to work with. Very supportive.
Yes.
And I hear it, and I know that. So all the artists who are listening, there's more calls to artists that are happening, folks. So you're down in the Lethbridge area, make sure you reach out to the Pogo Brothers, because they're going to help connect you with us as we move forward on a lot of the programs. So thank you both for your time. Always appreciate it, Johnny. Always appreciate your comments, your humor. And yes, we all do want to see you back on stage. There's no doubt in my mind. So
yeah, I love talking to you guys. I love telling jokes, and look forward to getting up to Calgary one day and shaking your hand.
I like the sound of that.
Without sanitizing first.
Also sanitize.
Well, hey, cheers, gentlemen. Thanks again. We appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks. I know we're going to talk more, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Take care, guys.
Lawrence, the Pogo Brothers have the right attitude. They've got the right positive engagement with the community. They have their, I think they have a lot of their support of the community. And, in the small, let's call it small, but in the smaller cities in our province, the Lethbridge areas, they want their businesses to survive. In the bigger cities, sometimes you go, well, if that one doesn't survive, it's not the end of the world. There's another one that's similar to it. But I think Lethbridge has a lot of strength when it comes to, they're a small community. And these guys have been, entrenched in that community for a long time.
Well, I mean, it's the fourth highest Métis population, in Region 3. And, we support Lethbridge as much as we, get asked to. And I know from the community members that I know down there, they definitely support these brothers and what they're doing. Pogozelski is such a big, long name, but definitely shortening it to Pogo is a lot easier. But Roy and John have, John with his business background and having this place where people can gather, these young people to just enjoy themselves in that university area. And then Roy, who's, an academic, he definitely knows a lot of community members and Blackfoot Nation members too. Every Blackfoot Nation member that I speak to in Lethbridge, they always ask me if I know Roy Pogozelski, right?
Yeah, they've got their tenure down in that area. So kudos to them. I hope that, they continue to fight through this bit of time here until hopefully we can start opening things up. And you're right. What connects people, just as much? It's the entertainers. It's the entertainment. And I know they get them all in there. And I've heard Johnny's comedy before. Fabulous. They're, I really like, supporting those two guys. So Lawrence, we're getting to the end of our show here. We talked a little bit about, I don't understand why people are trying to bring marijuana across the border. We talked a little bit about solar power. We talked a little bit about the vaccine, managing cohorts for families, and we talked a little rodeo because we do like that. So why don't you?
We also we can't forget though. Before we got interrupted, we were talking about these politicians not knowing who the Métis people are. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
But I mean, I don't want to point fingers at them and say, ignorant this, ignorant that, because I'm not that type of person. If they don't know, I'll tell them. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, you really should really understand this at the same time.
And I didn't perceive that in one bit, because again,
No.
I know you don't know everything, Lawrence, just like I don't know everything, but I'm open-minded. But in the sense of, when you're a politician, you probably should at least figure out what are the different demographic of your constituents. What are their backgrounds? And when you look at a large number of the Métis people, you should probably, know a little bit about that culture, because it's
and it also
forefront.
falls in that line, and I'm not sure if people have heard about it. It's the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that talked about educating, or at least knowing who we are, right? So when we see that, and it's no offense to those MLAs, we kind of go, well, you're not on the reconciliation path as much as you really should be. If you're not understanding me before I walk in the room, and you're relying on me to educate you,
then they should be doing a little bit of that work. So Lawrence,
Yeah.
let's close it out there. So thanks, folks, to listening to The Squeaky Wheel. You can always reach us, tsw at métis3.org. Find us on the website, métis3.org. You can always email Lawrence or I. Happy. Thank you to our subscribers. Make sure you go to Google, go to your YouTube, and all you got to do is click that bottom red button that says subscribe. And you're giving us a lot of support. We appreciate bringing this conversation from a Métis perspective. And from the Captain, Ross Pambrun, and from the President, Lawrence Gervais, thank you, folks, for listening.